right, tonight we ought to be able to finish the book of Matthew, or not the book of Matthew, but the Sermon on the Mount. We're down now to chapter 7, but let's look now at the Sermon on the Mount. We had chapter 5, and in chapter 5 he gives us all of those blessings, and that tells us the character of a man that's pleasing to God, and these are the kind of people that's going to be able to get into the kingdom when the Lord sets up his kingdom. He goes ahead then in chapter 5 and tells the works that a man is supposed to do that is pleasing to God. How to control yourself, how to do this, and so forth, and in doing that. Then in chapter 6, we went into that, and that tells about the motives, the character of the heart of an individual. When you're giving your alms and when you're praying and when you're fasting, don't do it in a hypocritical way. Make sure that you're serious about it. That's the kind of person that will be able to get into the kingdom of God. Now then tonight in chapter 7, we're going to be continuing on, and this is going to be what I would call 7 foundation principles of life. These are going to be disconnected things, but they are connected together by the fact that these are the principles or the foundation that you ought to build your life on. And if you'll use these principles to build your life on, to make your decisions, then everything is going to fall in place. So that's the thing that we're going to be talking about. As we look at them, just very quickly, you can take a look and you can see these 7 things that we're going to be talking about here in there. And we'll end up with the impression that the listeners had when they heard the Sermon on the Mount. So we'll go back up here to the first one and we'll begin talking about it then. Now, last week, we talked about judging. We started it, so let's go back, just like we didn't say anything about it last week. But in chapter 7, verse 1, he says, "Judge not, that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, ye shall be judged, and with what measure you mete, it shall be measured unto you." So now here he's telling them, don't judge. Now, this is a very misunderstood passage. Because we're going to find out that there are times of when you have to judge. For instance, in Matthew the 7th chapter, verse 15, as we've got down here, skip down, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ravening wolves." So be careful of them. In 1 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 12, here he says that there was a fornicator in the church, and he said, you are to expel him. Deliver him to Satan. And he said, I'm not talking about fornicators outside. I'm talking about those inside. He said, for what are we to judge the world? We judge those within. So there is a judgment that we are supposed to have. In Acts the 20th chapter and in verse 29 and 31, Paul there is talking to the elders at Ephesus, and he says, now I know that after my departing, grievous wolves shall enter in among you, even among your own selves, even in the eldership. There's going to be some of these wolves move in. And he says, watch you therefore. So we got to watch. So there's some judgment to be made then in all of this. Again, in Romans the 16th chapter and verse 17, there it talks about that there are people that their God is their belly, and we are to not have anything to do with them. So now there is a judgment that we are to judge then. So here he starts out and he says, judge not. Then the teaching of the Bible says there is a judgment that you are to judge. And you say, is there a contradiction? And no, there is not a contradiction in this at all, because as we look at what the Bible teaches on the subject, in John chapter 7 verse 28, there he says, judge not according to appearance, but judge righteous judgment. So we're commanded to judge. So we're commanded to judge, make a decision about people, and we're commanded to do that, but it's to be a righteous judgment. And it's not to be just on appearance. So you say, well, how then can you judge someone? If you can't look at them and judge by their appearance, how do you do it? Now, we're back at Matthew chapter 7 again. Here, flip down now to verse 16. It says, by their fruits you shall know them. And so We judge people like we judge trees. This is an apple tree, that's a pear tree, this over here is something else. And you say, well, Lowell, you're judging. Well, yeah, I'm judging, but I'm judging by the fruit. This tree puts on pears, so it's a pear tree. And this over here puts on apples, so it's an apple tree. See? And so that's the kind of judgment that we are permitted then to make. Again, we have James chapter 4, verse 12, and here he tells us that we are not to judge in the sense of telling who's going to be saved and who's going to be lost here. Now, let's take Saddam Hussein as he's on our mind now, having murdered all these people, and we're assuming everything that's said about him is true. And so you say, well, he's a very wicked man. Yes, he's a very wicked man. Now, I've made a judgment. He's a very wicked man. But what have I made a judgment on? By his works. In other words, if these works are true, then he is a very wicked man. Now then, listen to me. Saddam Hussein is going to hell. Is that true or false? I don't know. I don't know. Now, I could put it this way. If he continues in his wicked ways, the Bible teaches such wicked people, murderers, will go to hell. See? But you say, what about him? I don't know. I don't know. Will he repent? Will he change? There's so many things that I don't know. So what God says is, he says, Lowell, you have to make some judgments. You have to determine about a person, wicked or not wicked, but you have to make some judgments, but you have to judge a righteous judgment, and it's not your business to judge who's going to heaven and who's going to hell. See? God says, I'm the lawgiver, and I'm the judge. So we can say, okay, he's doing these wicked things. God teaches that all murderers will be in the lake of fire, and so therefore, if he continues this, he's doing this, then he's going to be in the lake of fire. But there's a big difference in that and me saying, now he's going to hell, somebody else going to hell, somebody else is going, because then I'm sitting in the judgment seat. You see the difference? It's kind of like an apple tree. This over here is an apple tree. Well, shall we cut it down? Well, yeah, look at that dumb thing. There's not many apples on it this year. Let's cut it down. That apple tree is no good. Well, hold it just a minute. I don't know what will be on it next year, do I? So I wait till next year. There's no apples on it. I wait till the next year. Finally, there comes a point where I see it's not going to produce any fruit. Then I can make my judgment, you see. Now, we come back here, and he says, now, in this passage, judge not that you be not judged. And what he's talking about is, don't go around and start judging. That here it is, Ryan, I know his heart is not right because he does this or he's done that, and he doesn't do things the way I think he should. He doesn't drive the kind of car that I think he should drive. He blah, blah, and so I start in. Now, he says, with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. What's going to happen to me if I run around and start judging everybody here and determining you're no good, you're okay, you're there, and so I start judging unrighteously, how are people going to judge me? He said, with what measure you meet, it shall be measured unto you. So every time that you people do any business with me, you begin to notice that if you buy a pound of something off of me, you only end up with 15 ounces. If you buy something here, I always come out winner. So you begin to say, when you're dealing with Lowell, you never get a full measure of what you buy. How will people start treating me then? It's going to come back to me. In other words, it's the same thing as saying that you're going to reap what you sow. So if I'm that kind of person, it's going to come back to me. Then he tells then about us judging, that we have to be careful now as we're judging, and so oftentimes when you find real judging people, you find people who do a lot of judging. This person is wrong, this person, and they're talking about it there, they are guilty of the same thing. That you'll find that to be true, because that's what's on their mind. Now, what he says here is, down in verse 3, he said, "But why beholdest thou the mote in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye?" So, this is a picturesque way of putting it. See, I have the ability, because I am so smart, I have such great insight, that I can look in Matt's eye and I can see just a little splinter in there. So I'm going to pick out his little splinter. But I've got a telephone pole stuck through my eye. That's what Jesus is saying here, see? He's saying, how foolish would that be? See? And so I need to get the telephone pole out of my eye if I'm going to start getting some small thing out of his eye. See? And so a lot of times we're guilty, big time, of things that we condemn other people of being guilty of. So he said, don't do that. Now the problem with that is a hypocrite. How hypocrite? Cast out first the beam out of thine own eye, and then thou shalt see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. So in a very pithy way, he teaches us about judging then. Going around and judging people, just making decisions and judging people on that basis then. Now, as we go to the next one then, it is the proper use of holy things. Now here he's going to say, give not that which is holy unto the dogs. Well, what's he talking about there? Well, the Jews would understand that. In Leviticus, the 7th chapter, one passage, there are other passages, he tells the priest, he said, now when you go in and something is offered to God on the altar, it becomes holy. And then he says, now I want you to offer it. Then I want the priest to eat, and he tells the priest how they're to eat it. Then if it's not all eaten, don't you just throw it out to some animal. Don't you just treat it like any kind of meat. But that which remaineth of the flesh of the sacrifice on the third day shall be burned with fire. You're going to treat it as though it's holy. You're not going to just throw it out and treat it like another chunk of meat. So he said, what you have to learn is that you do not take holy things and treat them in an unholy way. You don't take things that are sanctified and treat them as though they are a common thing. So those things in our life that we feel that really is dedicated to God, you could just start out with your body. Is your body dedicated to God? Is it a sacrifice thing? You're not your own. You were bought with a price. Okay, how should I treat my body? Should I treat it just like anybody else wants to treat it? Go out and misuse it? Use it to rob banks? Use it to commit fornication? No. You don't take that which is holy and treat it in an unholy way. I suppose that there's 1,000 different things that you could put with it. When we give our money to be used for the Lord here, and so suppose that we come up with a little extra money here Sunday, and so the elder says, you know, why don't we take that money and go on a vacation? So Steve and I decide we'll go on a vacation. See? Well, you've misappropriated something. See, it was given to the work of God, and now then we're just going to use it for a normal thing. So he said, the teaching is, make a distinction between that which belongs to God and that which belongs to you. Now, in the same verse, he says, cast not your pearls before the swine, lest happily they trample them under their feet and turn and rend you. So now, in all of this, don't go out and throw your pearls before those swine. What happens if you go out to that pig pen, and those pigs, if you've ever lived on a farm, what do you do when the master goes to the pig pen? What do the pigs do? They come running and get up there, and they expect you to feed them. And if you climb over in there without any feed, they're going to get you. Well, suppose that I take all my wife's jewelry and go to the pig pen. and I'm going to treat them nice, and so I throw the jewelry over there in their trough. What are they going to do to me? Turn around and rend me. Pigs are dangerous animals. Please believe me, they're dangerous animals. So you don't take that which is valuable, throw it to pigs. Pigs don't appreciate it, and they're going to turn from you. Now, this would be, as I would understand it, teachings, the way we deal with human beings. Now, every human being needs to be taught. Go ye into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature. But there are some pigs out there. See? There are some people out there that just an animal instinct. They will not accept the truth. They will not see the value in the pearls. They will not see that. And they're going to turn and they're going to rend you. They're going to get mad at you. Now, some illustrations of this is in Matthew chapter 15, verse 2 and 3. When we get over there, here are the Jews, and the Jews come up and they're asking Jesus why he's violating the law by not washing his hands. Now, there's nothing in the law this way. Here are people that's making up their own rules, and what's the chances of Jesus teaching them and really converting them? As you go through, you find it just gets tougher and tougher and tougher. In here, he rebukes them, and he says, no, and blah, 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 and in vain do you worship me. No change comes about. In Matthew chapter 21, verse 23, they come back to him again. And they come up to him very, very holy-like, and they say, Lord, the baptism of John, so they came up to him and they said, Lord, by what authority do you do these things? Now, they're all trapped. They're getting ready to catch him. They're hypocrites. They've got it down. If he says this, they're going to say this. If he says that, they're going to say this. They're going to trap him. What's the chances of teaching an individual like that? See? Of saying, well, let's sit down and study. Their heart is not right. So Jesus said, well, okay, I'll ask you a question. If you answer mine, I'll answer yours. But I'm not talking to you any farther than that. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or earth? So they got to thinking, okay, now if we say that it was from heaven, what will he say to us? Why didn't you obey it? If we say it's from earth, John the Baptist was not sent by God, what will happen? All these other people out here, they believe that John was sent by God, and they'll stone us. Man, we can't go either way. So they said, we're not sure. We don't know. And they turned around and left. Now, why didn't Jesus say, well, you nice people sit down and let's talk about this? He wasn't going to cast his pearls before the swine. In Acts the 13th chapter and verse 46, Paul goes in and he preaches in a Jewish synagogue. After he gets through preaching, it says, and they blasphemed and they contradicted themselves. What did Paul do? Anybody know what Paul did at that time? He said, you have judged yourself unworthy of eternal life. I'm going to the Gentiles. And that really made them mad. I'm not staying here and casting my pearls before the swine. Acts 19:9, the same way that is in there. He was in Ephesus. People came. They turned on him. And he left. Went out and rented his own place and started teaching out there. So we are to teach everybody, but we're not to stop and take the gospel and run it down a person's throat who's going to gag on it. You just as well take your diamond bracelet, go catch a pig and stick it down its throat and see whether the pig is going to be happy or not, see? So there has to be some decisions that are made. Not everybody is receptive of the truth. Okay, here's a good one. Ask, verse 7, and it shall be given unto you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened. Now, this is a very comforting passage right here, and it's a passage that I think we ought to consider more in here, that this is the kind of person that will learn the truth. It's the opposite kind of person that we just got through talking about, which is the swinish type of an individual. But he said, if you'll do this, if you'll ask, and you seek, and you knock. Now, all of this means exactly the same thing, except do you see the acceleration a little bit in it? In other words, the first one is you ask God. Then what's the next thing that he says? Which means the same thing. What are you to do? Seek. So now I want to know the truth. See? Lord, please give me the truth. Now then, I'm seeking for it. If I'm up here looking, what would you think if I lost my ring? What would you tell me to do? I said, anybody see my ring? Can you get my ring? No, I don't see it. Well, what would you tell me to do? Go look for it. Go look for it. And there, seek it. Then knock. Knock. What happens if somebody comes to your door? They knock. Now, generally we go to the door, you know, well, they're not home, so we leave. So, what would you do? I go, you don't answer. What? I'm going to get that door open. See, that's the whole point. You may call the police and say, hey, come up here and get this guy out on the porch. Police comes up, and I said, I need to get in. Okay, they knock on the door. If you keep knocking, see, so if you don't keep knocking, you're not going to get in. So when you're seeking for truth, when you're trying to find the truth, what does this teach that you should do? Exert an effort. Put forth an effort. If you're a truth seeker, if you're really seeking, you're really knocking, you're really looking, God gives you a promise. You'll find it. Now, he gives us a promise based on this. We ask him. He goes ahead and he says, or what man is there of you who, if his son shall ask him for a loaf, will give him a stone? Now, a little interesting thing here. Over there, a loaf of bread is not like our loaves of bread here. The loaf of bread over there is like a thin pancake. It's just like a pancake about that big around. It's what it is. And so you can have 12 loaves of bread, and they won't stack up any higher than this. Now, there's lots of rocks there. Those of you who've seen pictures, see there's billions of rocks in Israel. The whole thing is made of rocks. And so there are many rocks that are flat, round rocks. So he said, what father is there if his son comes and said, Dad, would you please give me a loaf? He wants to eat, doesn't he? What dad will give him a rock that looks like a loaf of bread? And here, son, and let him break his teeth on it. You say, dads don't do that. A father would love his son more than that. His whole point is, if your dad won't do that, do you think I would do that? In other words, if your father helps you and gives you, don't you think I would do that same thing? Or he said, if he shall ask for a fish, will he give him a serpent? Hand out a snake and give it to him? No, dads love their kids more than that. Well, then he says, if you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father who is in heaven give good gifts to them that ask him? So, he just compares it. If an earthly father does that, what do you expect me to do? So he said, just understand this. Truth seekers, you get busy and you seek the truth. Okay? Get busy and seek the truth. Now, it's an interesting thing, really, in doing this. As you ask, there are certain things that come into play. Jesus is not trying to cover every little detail. Let's look at some things we've already learned. If you're going to ask God to forgive you, what is it you have to do? We've already learned. You have to forgive others. James says, if you don't ask in faith, you're a double-minded man and don't think you're going to receive anything. So if you're going to ask God, Lord, I want this. I know you won't give it to me, but I'm going to ask you anyway. I'm sure that you won't, but maybe you will. He said, I won't. You're a double-minded man. And then he says, many times people ask and they don't get it because they ask for their own pleasure. Is there a difference in me going to God and asking him for physical blessings, for a job, and so forth, in order to provide for my own, or I go home tonight And I tell Helen, hey, how would you like to take a cruise? You know, she says, well, do we have the money? No, but I'm planning on asking God a little while. Lord, give me a raise, give me money somehow, so I can take a cruise, for my pleasure. Okay? He said, I don't bless you on that basis in there. And then 1 John 5 says that he will answer if we ask according to his will. Say, Lord, it's according to your will. How do we want a son to come and ask us? If a son comes and asks, can I have this? Can I have that? Do we want the son to appreciate us? And Dad, please give it to me according to your will. In other words, how big a loaf? I'd like to have this big a loaf, Dad. But whatever you want to give to me, I will accept. See? And so this is the thing here that he's talking about there. So there are certain things around it, but Jesus is not talking about those things. He's saying you've got to put forth an effort when you are seeking for the truth. See? Now, this should be a comforting thing to us in here. A lot of times we have the idea that if you see somebody walking down the street or something, you better run and grab them and try to teach them the gospel. And if you don't, they can't become a Christian. Or if you're riding on an airplane, you've got to teach somebody. Now, it's fine to talk with them, see if they're interested and so forth. But a lot of times as Christians, we have a real guilty feeling that here it is, if my neighbor is not converted, it's my fault. Well, now wait just a minute. There's two things in this. Does your neighbor have any responsibility? Yeah. If your neighbor has an honest heart, what will your neighbor be doing? Asking, seeking, and so forth. Now you better be ready, because God may use you. And that's the illustration here that I'm going to give right up here. Here we have a guy who's praying, and God sends a teacher. Now, anybody think of any illustrations in the Bible of where this is true? Okay? Of where he does this? In Acts the 8th chapter in verse 26, you remember about the eunuch? Eunuch is riding along studying his Bible. He's all confused. He's studying Isaiah, and he's reading it. God sends an angel, appears to Philip, and says, Philip, go down to the road that goes from here to here. That'd just be like if God told me right now, said, Lowell, go down to the road that goes from Seattle to Spokane. Well, it's I-90, isn't it? I go down to I-90. So I'm down there, right here. Here goes the eunuch. He's going, he's reading. He's just passed Philip. And then the Spirit said, go catch that guy and attach yourself to him. He runs up there and he said, and looks up, and here this guy's reading his Bible, bouncing along. And Philip said, do you understand what you're reading? He said, how can I except some man should guide me? And Philip then would say, well, I can. And well, come on up. He got up there. Here's a man riding along in a buggy, wanting to know the truth, and God provided a teacher for him. Do you remember the story of Cornelius? Cornelius was a good man and did all those good things. And what an angel didn't come down and tell him, now Cornelius, here's what you do to be saved. He said, you send down to Joppa and get a man by the name of Peter who lives in a certain house. It took 4 days. So Cornelius calls in his servants, said, you go down to Joppa and you get a man named Peter and he lives over here. 4 days later he comes back. What's Cornelius doing, by the way? Is he asking, seeking, knocking? Yeah, he's putting forth an effort. God tells Peter, go with him. Peter comes back and says, why'd you call me? He said, I need to know. See? And so Peter started talking to him. So we need to understand this, that if a person really has an honest heart, and this applies to you and me as well as anybody else, but if we really have an honest heart, we really seek, we really knock, we really ask, it'll be given to you. God knows how to happen. God knows how to provide the teacher. It may be that you're the teacher in there. Troy was telling me about 3 weeks ago, he took a walk and came out. And he walked by this neighbor's house, and this guy came out and asked him something about, said, do you study the Bible? And Troy said, well, yeah, I do. He said, I'd like to study the Bible. Okay, how about Tuesday night? Fine. And so Troy told me Sunday, he said, we've been studying now about 3 weeks. That's in there, but here it is. Just a guy comes out and does this. And I bet all of us have had situations where we say, a weird thing happened to me. I was here, and then it just happened to come up, and so I had these classes, you see. No, it's not a weird thing. It's not a weird thing. God gives us the promise, see, that is in there. Now then, how do you know what to do? How do you know what to do in life? Here's me and here's you. How do I know how to treat you? Because, let's face it, you take a guy like Ryan, he causes me trouble. How do I treat him if he's going to cause me trouble? What do I do? You say, well, under most circumstances with your friends, you know how to do this and that. Yeah, okay. But let's suppose I go home tonight and Helen, she's homesick, but I walk in and so she throws a temper tantrum at me for nothing that I did. What do I do? Somebody comes up to me after class tonight and mistreats me in some way. Nothing that I do. How do I treat you? How do I know what to do? You see, it's real easy for me to know what to do as long as you're doing me a favor. I want to put you to the test tonight, okay? I want everybody to give me a $10 bill, and I'll show you how I ought to act towards you, okay? You going to do it? Hold up your hand. I don't have any takers. That's easy, isn't it? Oh, thank you. Oh, boy, you see, like this. But how do I treat you otherwise? See, as you go through life, how do you do that? Well, we're going to see, what's that thing right there, that what happens is, Lord's just going to turn the whole thing upside down and put you over there and me over here. He says, you do what you want them to do to you. He said, that's how you make your measurement here. So he said in verse 12, all things, therefore, whatsoever you would or wish that men should do to you, even so do ye also unto them, for this is the law and the prophets. So now, I go home and I walk in the house, and as soon as I walk in the house, Helen throws a fit. What do? It's all her fault. Shut your mouth, you idiot. I didn't do anything. That's what she deserves. What do I do? How do I respond? So I'm here. I don't know what to do. I don't even know what the situation is. How do I make a decision? All right, stop. Lowell, if you were in her shoes, she were in your shoes, and you had something on your mind that really bothered you, like whatever's bothering her, and even though, let's say she's totally in the wrong, she thinks I did something, she's totally in the wrong, so how would I want her to treat me if I'm at home and I've been thinking about this and I'm totally in the wrong, and when she comes home I said, why did you do that? How do I want her to respond to me? How would I like for her to respond to me? If I can stop and ask that question, I'll know how to respond to her. It's just that simple. If you talk about something infallible, we talk about the Pope, the Catholics say he's infallible. Well, he's not, but this is. You'll never make a mistake if you do this. I tell you what I'd like for her to do for me. Even though I'm wrong, if I'm really wrong, and I've got my facts all mixed up, and I think she did something she didn't do, and so I'm nervous, and for some reason or another, I bite her head off, I would like for her to sit down and say, honey, I'm really sorry, that I don't know what's wrong. Why don't we talk about it? Tell me what's on your mind. I said, well, before you left, you did this. Well, no, I didn't do that. No, I didn't do that. Kyle came over and he did that. Oh, so it's Kyle's fault. Yeah, so I'd like for her to give me a little kiss on the forehead and say, I'm sorry that you got upset, honey. She goes away. I get calmed down. That's the way I'd like to be treated. Now, would she like to be treated that way? In other words, if I do that to her, would that work? Okay. In other words, it's infallible. If you ever wonder what to do to me, just stop and say, what would I want him to do if it was turned around? Whatever it is. And then you do it. And I guarantee you there won't be any problem. So this is what the Lord says here. So whatever you would have people to do unto you, you do unto them. He says, for this is the law and the prophets. What does that mean? What that means is you take the whole law of Moses, that's what they were living under, all the prophets, all the teachings of God, and everything is based on that principle. That's what he says. Everything is based on that principle. We'll get to another principle where he talks about the same thing there. But there are certain principles of life. You never go wrong if you follow that. Now then, getting on the right road. He said, everybody make sure that you get on the right road. So he starts out here and he says, enter ye in by the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many are they that enter in thereby. For narrow is the gate and straiten the way, that's difficult, that leadeth unto life, and few are they that find it. So he said, keep this in mind. There are two destinations. And your job right now is to get on the right road. Just make sure you're on the right road. If I told you tonight that I want you to go to Dallas, Texas, and those of you who go to Dallas, Texas, I'll give $1 million. If you don't make it to Dallas, then you're going to be arrested and so forth. What would be your job as you leave here and go out? As you leave the building, what you think about? What's your job? Just get on the right road. How do you get to Dallas? Is it north or is it south, or what do we do? Well, quickest way to Dallas is go out here, get on this road. Okay, that's where it is. So, got my map. So your job right now is to get on the right road, isn't it? You get on the right one, it'll take you to the right place. Now, he said, the problem is, to be on the right road, it's straightened. It's narrow. The right road is not just a great, big, wide road to do anything that you want to do. Now, the way to destruction is that great, big, wide road. If you want to go to destruction, you don't even worry about what you do. Just close your eyes and go through life. Don't even give it another thought. And I know where you'll get. If you had to go to Dallas to get $1 million and you never gave it another thought, would you get to Dallas? Never even thought about it, never cared about it. No, you're not going to make it. All right, that's what he's saying. Put forth the effort to make sure you're on the right road. Few people in life do it. Many people close their eyes and go through it without it, is what he's saying. Now we're down to that evil men. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inward are ravening wolves. For by their fruits you shall know them. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, every corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down, cast into the fire. Therefore by their fruits you shall know them. So I said, just like trees. You judge people just like you judge trees. You look at the fruits. Somebody comes in and they bring in evil things, they are evil. Somebody brings in good things, they do good, they are a good person. So I said, that's how you judge them. And this is exactly the opposite of what he said. Judge not, you be not judged. Just throw something out. Now then he says, watch in life. Look out. Because you've got to make decisions. You've got to see people for what they are and learn to judge people on what they do, not on how they look. See? That's the thing that he's telling them to do. Now then, as we get now to the next one, here in verse 21, he says in here something about exactly the opposite in here. He's going to tell us the kind of people who will not enter into the kingdom of heaven. So now we're going to take that away. He said, now just keep in mind, here's a group of people that will not. Well, let's read it. He said, not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, if you got somebody who is a corrupt person, they're a corrupt tree, they're going to go by the wayside. But and it takes more than just calling me Lord. See, so he said, not everyone that saith, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father who is in heaven. Now, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy by thy name, and by thy name cast out demons, and by thy name do many mighty works? So here it is, they're going to say, Lord, didn't we do all of these things? Going around and doing all of this? And then what's the Lord going to say to them? Depart from me. I never knew you. These kind of people are not going to get into the kingdom of God. And so they can say, oh, we did all of this. No. He says, and look at the reason here, I never knew to you, depart from me, ye that work iniquity. What does the word iniquity mean? Lawlessness, without law. So those of you who worked without the law of God, I never knew you. Never knew you. You're not part of me. Now stop and think of all the things that he's taught here in the Sermon on the Mount. He's taught a whole lot of things, the kind of person you need to be, hadn't he, to get into the kingdom. And now if you're not a law obeyer, you're not going to get in. Okay, let's get the last part here then. Now, building your life on the words of Jesus. As we start with this, everyone therefore that heareth these words of mine and doeth them shall be likened to a wise man who built his house upon a rock. The rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. What's the story? What's the moral here? Foundation, isn't it? Building on the right foundation. What is the foundation, by the way? What did he say? You build your life on what? My words. See? So if you hear my words, build your life on it, it's like building a house on a good foundation. And so then he says, and the rain descended, the floods came, winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell not. And every one that heareth these words of mine and doeth them not shall be likened unto a foolish man who built his house upon the sand. The rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew and smote upon that house, and it fell. And great was the fall thereof. Well, we know that. Anybody knows that. If you read in Luke chapter 6, verse 46, he tells the same parable. He goes into just a little more detail. He says, a person that builds on my words is like a person that goes out and digs way down until you hit rock. You dig way down, hit rock. Then you use that for a foundation. The other guy is a guy that says, it's too far to dig. I mean, we got to dig down it. So he just builds his house up on the sand. So he said, just mark it down that when problems come in your life, when troubles come, if your life is not built on my words, you are going to crumble. You're going to fall, just like that house. But if your life is built on my words, you're going to go through that storm of life just like a house built on a good foundation. If you've ever had your house reappraised or anything, if you live in an old one like I do, you know what's the first thing that appraiser will do? Comes out to look at your house. What's the first thing he does? What kind of foundation you have? He goes out and looks at it. See? And if it's built on cedar block, oh boy, we're not going to trust this one. You see, it's foundation. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying we build our life upon his words. Now then, we come to the next, and this is the impression of the sermon that the hearers heard right here. Look at what they said. And it came to pass when Jesus had finished these words, the multitudes were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as their scribes. Wow! This guy is a different kind of teacher. The way the scribes would teach is they would come, you ask them a question, And they'd say, well, okay, back here the rabbi said this, and another rabbi said this, and another rabbi said this. Well, what did Jesus say? You've heard it said of them of old. See? He does away with that. But I say unto you, and he's teaching as one who has authority. This is new to these people. They haven't heard this before. Who is he? He's somebody greater than our rabbis that come. What's the situation? They were just astonished. So they close the sermon, go down off of that mount, and go to the next thing. And that's where we'll pick up our story the next time, of where he goes on then, telling them what to do. Okay, class dismissed.